Hello. Welcome to BSLU Universe, the official podcast of Be Someone Legendary. I'm your host, LB Wright. First off, I want to thank you for coming today and taking time out of your very busy day to listen to my podcast. It definitely means a lot to me. I appreciate you showing your man love. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this podcast. Today we'll be talking about losses, specifically the 3 types of losses you will face in life. Now, loss number 1 is when you give your all and you still lose. Now, I've had this type of loss many times in my life. However, at this moment, the one that jumps out the most is a football game that I had during my junior year of high school. We were facing a team that we had just shut out 1 or 2 weeks ago. And now we're facing them on their home field, and we're having an extremely tough time with them, and they're basically whooping our butts. And that game, I was definitely giving my all. I was running my hardest. I was reading my routes as best as I could, reading the lanes as best as I could, the holes, and it just wasn't enough. And I remember we were down 10 points. It was our ball. It was towards the end of the game in the fourth quarter, and I knew I was getting the ball, and I was ready. I was ready to rock, ready to score. In my head, I said, hey, all I have to do is score. Our defense is going to show up like they normally do. They were super consistent that season, and I'll get the ball back again. I'll score again, and that's it. Game over, baby. And spoiler alert, that didn't happen. But I remember I had gotten the ball. I ended up getting tackled behind the line, and I laid down for what felt like forever. And I remember that night, the stars were very bright that night. And I just remember laying there upset, a little sad, not too sad at the moment, but more upset than anything else. And I just remember telling myself, hey, LB, you gave your all. And just immediately upon telling myself that, I started crying. And for me, even though those type of losses hurt the most, they're definitely the most beneficial. And the reason why I say this is because it's in this moment that you find out the type of person that you really are. You find out if you're the type of person where when you face a loss, after you give your all, do you just fold up and disappear into the night? Or do you come back and finish strong? And for me, that type of loss that I experienced, along with the many others that I've experienced later on in my life, fueled me. I just remember later that night, I was so angry. But it was the healthy kind of anger, the healthy kind of rage, where it fueled and it motivated me for how can I be better? How can I improve so I don't ever have to experience this again? And I didn't want to not experience it out of fear. But I knew that if I constantly pursued excellence so that I wouldn't experience it again, that I would be improving myself at the same time. But never afraid, never be afraid of experiencing this type of loss. If you're experiencing this type of loss right now, I'll be the first to tell you that you're on the right track. It's the people that never experience this type of loss because they never give their all towards something, that they're not on the right path. They're not on the right path to greatness. It's this type of loss that separates the average Joe from the good, the great, the legendary. And this defines how great you'll truly become. Now, a historical example of this, beyond just my my high school football game example, is 2007-2008 NBA season. Kobe Bryant went off that season with the Lakers. I'm a ride or die Kobe fan for life. Black Mamba forever. Nothing but love, rest in power, baby. And I remember that 07-08 season, Kobe Bryant going off after having basically MVP year the previous year. And he wins the MVP, first seed in the West, tough West this year. And leads his team to the finals up against, our rivalry, the Celtics. And despite beating every team before them in 5 games, they end up losing to the Celtics in 6. And I remember watching an interview where Kobe had said that loss, that 08 loss, sat with him to this day and motivated him to never experience that loss ever again. And that's an historical example of how someone like Kobe Bryant gave his all and still came up short. It still wasn't enough. Still got that butt spanked. But as a true Kobe and Lakers fan, you already know what happened the next 2 years. Came back, put in the work, won back-to-back championships. Redemption. Now, here at Be Someone Legendary, as a listener of BSL Universe, that's what we aspire to. That no matter the losses that we face, even when we give our all and still come up short, we don't shy away. We come back, we put in the work, and we grind it out, baby. Now, we're going to go ahead and move on to the second type of loss. With the first type of loss, you should never avoid, but this type of loss, you should always avoid. However, your man's has to learn the hard way, so he's definitely experienced this type of loss. And this type of loss is when you half booty, half-ass, and you lose. Now, for me, my freshman year at University of Alabama, I was experiencing a lot of things, traumatic things in my life, with my family. I was pursuing my basketball dreams. I was in a relationship that, wasn't working out. So on, so forth, excuses. That's how I perceive those now. And we'll save that for another podcast on excuses and taking self-control in your life. But in the moment, they were extremely impactful towards my life. So much so that I finished my freshman year with a 1.5 GPA. And, my fellow undergraduate students know that usually you're getting put on probation, suspension, or kicked out. I wasn't put on probation, unfortunately. And thankfully, I wasn't kicked out. But I was going to be put on academic suspension. Now, in that moment, I was exposed. Life exposed me. Exposed that, hey, you're half-assing right now. You're half-bootying right now. And, this type of loss is also equally as important as the first because it exposes your weaknesses. It exposes your comfort zone. And it shows you another way that you can be better, that you can grow. So, for me, that's what happened. It exposed my study habits. It exposed, why do I, at that time in my life, allow so many external factors to dictate my internal peace, to dictate my actions. And it allowed me to grow in many ways where I was able to eventually graduate in a total of 3 years. I was able to graduate a whole year early and with a high enough GPA to eventually get into graduate school that I just finished. Thank God. Finally, I just finished graduate school back in May. And, that's a moment where I could have just folded up, could have just disappeared into the night. And, allowed my half booty in to be a crutch, an excuse to just, I tried. Now, a very, very historical moment, another personal moment, not to me, but because I actually was able to witness this, was the first time that Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz fought each other. This was June 1st, 2019. Anthony Joshua, undefeated fighter. He was/still is a part of the three-headed monster, Wilder, Fury and Joshua, coming in facing another undefeated fighter but not as well known, and ends up getting TKO'd, right? The other guy's the underdog, and he ends up getting TKO'd by this guy. Now, I'm not going to say that he didn't prepare for that fight, because I'm sure he did, but it could have been maybe strategy, it could have been mindset, it could have been, oh, I know I'm going to run through this person. He's not Wilder, he's not Fury. I'm going to run through this person, as Joshua was doing in his previous fights. And unfortunately, he had to pay the ultimate price, getting embarrassed in front of millions of people. Now, the example I gave you for my grades in freshman year, an example with Anthony Joshua, he could have just folded up into the night and disappeared. However, what separates the average from the good, from the great to the legendary, is what you do in these moments. Now, fast forward, he comes back and he dominates him in the other fight, so much so that a lot of viewers thought it was boring. But again, that shows the heart of a champion. That shows a legend in the making. That's what separates you from an average Joe to legendary. Now, with that being said, that type of loss is still something that you want to avoid. You don't want to have to experience that type of loss, because that means you're not doing what you need to be doing to be great, to be a legendary, to be someone legendary. And last but not least, you have the third type of loss. And this type of loss is basically the loss that's out of your control. The loss that God, the universe, whatever you believe in or don't believe in, gives you. The loss that's out of your control. And these type of losses are just equally as important as the previous aforementioned losses. It's something that's going to test your resiliency, your grit, your tenacity, your faith, whether that's in God or whatever God you believe in, or your faith in yourself. And for me, this type of loss was always with the death of loved ones, to where, that's the ultimate thing that happens in your life where it's not in your control. And, that's something I experienced all throughout my life. Middle school, so on and so forth, undergrad, law school, etc. And it's one of those things where this type of loss is going to test you in a different way than the other two will, because you have no input or control over it. And us as humans, we want to control everything, right? And this is really going to test you, the type of person that you are. And for me, something that I always go to is Mark 7:15. Side note, this isn't going to be a religious heavy podcast, but if you can't tell already, I'm definitely a man of faith, but I'm not going to force religion down your throat, so don't worry about that. But I always go to Mark 7:15, and I reinterpret it. So it goes that it's not what goes into a man that defiles him, it's what comes out of a man that defiles him. And I just basically switch out defile for define, to where it's not what goes into a man that defines him, it's what comes out of a man that defines him. And what I interpret that as is, it's not the things that happen to you or your environment that defines you as a man or a woman. It's what you do in those moments. It's what you do in those environments. And all the examples I've given you, whether anecdotal, personal to me, or historical examples, they all show that. They all show that no matter the external factors that occurred, it's what you do when you experience those things. When stuff hits the fan, do you fold up and disappear? When it gets dark, when it gets gritty, do you fold up and disappear into the night, or do you shine bright? Or do you shine like the star that you say you are? Last historical example with this is, we all know Rumble in the Jungle with Muhammad Ali beating the undefeated, the younger, the stronger fighter at the time. Now, but what a lot of people don't know is that before that, Muhammad Ali was suspended from boxing for 3.5 years in his prime for refusing to go into the draft. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that in the athlete world and a fighter world, 3.5 years is an extremely long time to be out of the game. However, despite that, he comes back, gets a couple comeback fights, loses to Joe Frazier, an undefeated Joe Frazier, and then comes back, gets back into the number one contender fight, and then drops an undefeated, younger, stronger fighter, aka George Foreman, who was knocking everybody out. And that just shows that, hey, that was the type of loss that he experienced that was out of his hands, being suspended. Yeah, he could have said, yeah, I'm gonna go over the war. However, he didn't. And somebody else handed him that loss. He could have just folded up, said, oh, 3.5 years, I won't be coming back to the sport. That's too long. He came back. He did his thing, even lost. Came back from another actual loss in the ring, and then got his belt back. Just like Joshua did. Came back, got his belt back, and was champion again. Just like Kobe did. Won the MVP, lost in the finals, came back and won the finals 2 times in a row, back to back. So, my final question to you before I log off is, in the tough moments, when the lights turn off, when nobody's watching, when the seas are stormy and rocky, do you disappear into the night? Or do you show up and show out? That's going to separate you from the average, from the good, from the great, to being legendary. Now, I just want to thank everybody again for coming and listening. It definitely means a lot to me. If you're listening on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any podcast hosts out there, I want to say thank you again for listening to my voice for these 15 to 20 minutes. It definitely means the world to me. If you're on YouTube and watching the visual podcast, I appreciate you. I love you. For those that prefer to read, I have a blog post out there on Medium. You can just go on Medium, type in at the Legend of LB, and my blog will come up. If you prefer to read, if you prefer to watch on YouTube, my channel is called Be Someone Legendary. I'll update everyone if it changes to BSL Universe, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to keep it at BSL, Be Someone Legendary. And if you want to check out the Instagram to see behind the scenes look, BTS, the Instagram for this podcast is Be Someone Legendary. And if you want to check your mans out, my personal Instagram is Legend of LB. Definitely show love. I appreciate everybody. I appreciate everybody for coming and listening to me talk. And at the end of the day, like, subscribe, comment, share, give me feedback, open up a dialogue. I'm definitely down with that too. With that being said, go be someone legendary, because legacy is forever. Until next time, peace.